The next stitch in our series is the back stitch. This is the one of the oldest sewing stitches that have ever been invented, and this was how originally clothing and fabric was hand sewn for a permanent stitch. All those old paintings that you see with all those old dresses before machine sewing, this is how you did it. So you start with a prepped thread and needle. So you start by piercing the fabric, and instead of piercing it right on the very end, you want to move it in a little bit. About a ½ inch is appropriate. So you pierce your fabric, you come back up about a ½ inch over, and this is very similar to the basting stitch, this first stitch. Now this is where it gets different. Instead of going forward, we're going to go backwards to our original point of entry. And then as we push our needle through, we're going to move forward a ½ inch ahead. So, and through the whole thing, that's why it's called the back stitch. You go back to where you went in, move forward, and you're sewing these loops. As you sew, these stitches will start to look like the machine stitches that we're all familiar with on the top. So back to where you were, forward past where you were, back to the beginning, forward past the last point. So as you sew, you should be almost right on top of your stitches, but not so close that you're stitching on top of another stitch. Now as you sew, the front will start to look like a dotted line, the back will look like a series of loops. And you continue this stitch in as straight a line as you can. To help me create a straight line, I ironed in a fold that I'm following, that I'm not sure you can see in the video. But you can do the same thing, and it'll make your stitching line very straight. Now these stitches can get bigger, and then they can get smaller depending on the length of your needle. If we want to go a little smaller, we start back where we were, and do not go past our initial exit point quite so far, and then suddenly we can change how big the stitches are. Now my thread is not very happy with me today. And so this is how they sewed clothing together, because they can make these stitches very small, and this does not look very pretty. Try that again. There we go. In where you were, out past you was. And you do this all the way to the end. When you are ready to stop, you go back to your last exit point and pull it through your last entry point so that you create the last stitch. Then to knot this off, you take a little pinch at your termination point so that you create a thread loop at the very end. Then you run your needle through the loop once, twice, 3 times, hold the loop open, slide it closed, and it creates a knot. Clip your thread so that there's a small tail so the knot doesn't come untied, and you're done.